sprint strength versus distance strength, right? Like the sprinters in the gym are going to be doing different things from the distance swimmers, obviously. And what are the differences, and what should be the differences, mainly between those two groups? And even if you wanted to put in a third group of maybe middle distance, because we certainly did that at Auburn. We would have three groups: sprinters, middle distance, distance. And then as the season went on, it would actually even get into smaller subgroups of breaststroke, butterfly, backstroke, freestyle. And is that important to maybe at some point get a little bit more specific with your breaststrokers, let's say?
100%. There's certain movements that we can do to develop different muscle groups and mobility in different strokes. 100%. Let's start with the sprint and distance swimmers, right? And the middle will fall somewhere in between there, right? But in general, right, the notion has typically been distance swimmers, they should do more repetitions, more muscular endurance. But then again, now we're adding volume on top of volume because they already do more in the water, right? So our distance swimmer, who was second in the 800 at the World Championships 2019, who's working his way back up into a good form and good shape, he's really wrapped up in how little can I do with the most gains, right? Where can I get the least amount of work with the most efficiency in terms of development? Sprinters, they like to push it. With them we can risk a little bit more, if you will. We can stay on a little bit higher loads and we can do more power movements. We can add a little bit extra hypertrophy there for the sprinters because, man, sprinters are getting big nowadays, right? Distance swimmers, they're also big, but in different ways. In terms of actual programming, I don't do a crazy amount of difference there. It also is going to come down to what does the swimmer want, right? And how do they see themselves developing and what has worked for them. Sure, there's going to be slightly different roles here when we swim distance. It's always rotational movements, right? We're talking freestyle now. So also something that is kind of lacking in the strength portion, I want to say, is rotational movements in the gym.
Right.
If you think about the squat, clean, snatch, bench press, pull-ups, they're just in a linear fashion. So how can we add a little bit anti-rotational work, little push-pull movements? Those things get a little bit more crucial for the distance swimmers, working on the total body connection, if you will. But in general, man, they should also stay powerful, because the longer we swim, the more walls we have. So our distance swimmer, he has in the past focused a lot more on the lower body development and not so much on upper body development. We have just made a little switch 2 months ago for him to mix them both in a little bit. And then as for the sprinters, man, yeah, they need to learn how to move weight. And I'm talking about 75, 80, 85% of max fast. And again, and then swimming it's a cyclical sport. So it's not just one repetition. So we want to be able to reproduce that power over extended periods of time. So can we do 5, 6, 7, 8 reps with high loads fairly quick without the velocity necessarily slowing down? It's going to be pretty important for sprinters.
Right.
So I try to be aware of the volume. So I want to say that sprinters sometimes do more volume work, or at least here. And I want to be really cautious with the distance swimmers because they do train a lot, can come up to 70, up to 100K a week, right? And with that, it's natural if we get some shoulder tendency. And if that's the case, backing away a little bit more and adjusting. That's for any program. Right? And as for middle distance swimmers coming right in the middle, yeah, a few more repetitions perhaps. I don't mind adding a little bit more strength endurance for those guys, and then a little bit more perhaps power endurance. And that's also common to see someone that has gone through a strength program or a good cycle of strength training where they get stronger and get more powerful, but man, still that last 5-10 meters, they're struggling. Is that a good time to perhaps rethink to introduce a little bit more strength endurance and power endurance on land? And then we're talking power endurance 15 up to 20 repetitions while still keeping the speed in the movements, absolutely valuable. And that can also be valuable for a sprinter. So even though, you know, we tend to think a lot about sprint, middle distance, and distance, they do have a lot of similarities, right? And then it's a lot about listening to the individual and hearing their needs and what has worked in the past, especially if you're working with an athlete who's a little bit more renowned. So we have a few renowned, and then I have a big group that I'm molding into what I want them to do. So at this point, I'm doing a lot of general work where I know is still beneficial for swimmers. So we don't individualize things unless we're at the very top of the chain. And then absolutely, when we're coming into the strokes, right? Again, we have backstroke freestyle, a little bit more rotational work. And then I do tend to add a few movements in for those swimmers, and then adding a little bit more, say, lateral squats or lateral lunges for the breaststrokers, developing their hips a little bit more and doing a little bit more chest emphasized work for breaststrokers. But man, it's finding a balance, mixing things up, and you know, and then that gives a good variation for the swimmers, keeping them engaged in the weight room, and also makes it more fun for me in the weight room, so we don't continue to do the same thing all over again. So you know, watching their development, testing them, seeing how they're doing is going to be key, right? To find the right program. And that's a really broad answer to that question, right? So there's no right, wrong way here. It's about listening to the needs of the swimmers and going from there.
I like
Yeah.
it. I love it, man. Good information.